morning, students. My name is Abhilasha Rastogi and I'll be taking your zoology. Today I'm going to teach you the chapter Chemical Coordination and Integration. From that particular chapter, I'm going to take up a very important topic, that is the mechanism of hormone action. We all have the brief idea that hormones are nothing but the intercellular messengers, non-nutrient chemicals, and they are released in trace amounts. So hormones are inter stands for in between, cellular messengers which carry the message from one organ or one cell to another cell. Today what we are going to study is how do these hormones produce action at the target site. How do they bring out the effects on the target organ? That is what we are going to study today. So for this, let's start writing about your notes as well. Hormones. When you say hormones, for this we say bring effect on target site by binding to specific protein. If you remember your chapter biomolecules, there you have a table where the functions of the proteins are also being mentioned. So in that we know that proteins are also responsible for the formation of receptors. So those specific proteins that we are talking about are nothing but receptors. Now I would like to highlight another point over here. The receptors are of two types. Now, the types of receptors, if you will study, you will say, ma'am, they are of two types. One is referred to as extracellular receptor, the receptor which is present outside the cell, or we can call it as membrane bound receptor. The another category of receptor we have is intracellular receptor. The receptor which is present within the cell is referred to as intracellular receptor. Extracellular or membrane bound receptor is present on the cell membrane of the cell, whereas intracellular receptor, it is important to mention that majorly, I am not saying only, please be very focused and concerned about your words, because NTA manipulates the questions in bio basically on the words only. So majorly nuclear receptors, mind my words, there are cytosolic receptors as well, but majorly there are nuclear receptors. So we know that hormones bring action on the target site by binding to the receptors, which could be extracellular, which could be intracellular. Now for this, we are going to study about the nature of hormones. If we'll focus on the nature of hormones, you will simply say, ma'am, hormones could be of two types. They could be lipid soluble hormones. So when you say lipid soluble hormones, we are simply saying the synonymous term for it. They could be lipophilic. The term philic here means loving. They are lipid loving. And if they are lipid loving, definitely they are hydrophobic. They have a fear of water. Another category of hormone is lipid insoluble hormone. Now when you say lipid insoluble hormone, here we mean that this is lipophobic. And if it is lipid hating hormone or lipid fearing hormone, then definitely they are hydrophilic hormones. So for this we mention points that they are able to cross, easily pass through cell membrane. For this we say cannot cross cell membrane. This is the important point to be remembered. Lipid soluble hormone include the example of steroid hormones. And you know steroid is nothing but derived lipid only. So steroid hormones include estrogen, progesterone, androgens, etc. This is one category of hormones. Another category could be T3, T4, the thyroid hormones are also included under the lipid soluble hormones. Now, lipid insoluble hormones include protein, peptide, and polypeptide hormones. If we talk about this, we say this includes all the pituitary hormones, all the hypothalamic hormones, insulin, glucagon. These all are nothing but the protein peptide hormones which are lipid insoluble. Now there are certain amino acid derivative hormones. Now I would like to highlight that this includes catecholamines. If you remember, catecholamines are nothing but epinephrine, also known as adrenaline, norepinephrine, also known as noradrenaline, and they are derived from tyrosine amino acid. Melatonin is a hormone released from pineal gland, and it is basically derived from tryptophan amino acid. It is being formed by tryptophan, which is being converted into serotonin, and then eventually the melatonin is formed, if you are able to recall. So amino acid derivative hormones are the ones which are derived from the amino acids, which are derived from the amino acids, right? So this is the basic about the hormones. Now I am going to explain you the hormone action of FSH, that is follicle stimulating hormone, which is eventually a lipid insoluble hormone, which is definitely a lipophobic or hydrophilic hormone. FSH is produced from pituitary gland. The signal is being received from hypothalamus, and pituitary gland has a part called as adenohypophysis, which includes pars distalis, which is referred to as anterior pituitary, the source of FSH. So we'll simply see how the hormone action is being produced. Now I am putting the heading over here, hormone action. How does the hormone act? The hormone action of FSH, in bracket you can write lipid insoluble hormone. So let's understand this. Here, let me draw a blood capillary for you. This is a blood capillary. Let's label it. It's very simple to understand. This is blood capillary. In the blood, we can see the flow of hormones. These are lipid insoluble hormones. Now here, we have a phospholipid bilayer. This is just a diagram for your better understanding. I am just trying to draw head and tail of the phospholipid bilayer. There you go. Now it is same for the rest of the membrane. Okay. Now, because we know, we are very well aware of, one minute. We are very well aware of that this is a lipid insoluble hormone, and if it is a lipid insoluble hormone, then it should have a membrane bound receptor. This is a membrane bound receptor. If this is a membrane bound receptor, to this we can see the hormone will come and bind. Now I am just drawing over here a membrane bound protein. Let's label it that this is G protein. Side by side, I am also drawing an enzyme, the membrane bound enzyme, which is referred to as adenylyl cyclase. The active site for the enzyme is towards the cytosol, the cytoplasm. Now see, the NCRT says, if you have just look at your NCRTs, first is response 1. Now what is this response 1? I'm just decoding your NCRT. I'm not going little extra. I'm just giving you some extra knowledge to make your understanding better for your NCRT diagram. You can see that this hormone binds to the receptor. So let's label this as well. First step is binding of hormone to receptor. As soon as the hormone binds to receptor, there is a formation of hormone receptor complex. Point number 1. Hormones are highly specific to their receptors. No hormone can bind to any other receptor. They are very much receptor specific. So binding of the hormone to the receptor. As soon as they bind, this activates the membrane bound protein, which is G protein. In turn, this protein activates the enzyme, which is adenylyl cyclase. When this enzyme gets activated, this step is known as the first step, which your NCRT labels as response 1. Write it down in the bracket so that you know what exactly the response 1 in the NCRT means. Now what happens is the next step, second step. The second step is generation of secondary messenger. Now what happens? The cell must be having ATP. This enzyme named adenylyl cyclase converts ATP into second messenger CAMP. This is the second step which your NCRT labels. Now comes the third step, the biochemical response. Please pay attention to this. What happened? CAMP activates protein kinase. Now I would like to draw your attention. Kinase enzyme belongs to class 2 of the enzyme class. That is, of all the classes, there are total 6 classes, right? Oxidoreductase, transferase, hydrolase, lyase, isomerase and ligase. There are 6 classes. The second class is transferase. Kinase is responsible for the transfer of a group from one substrate to another. Now, as soon as this protein kinase gets activated, it is responsible for the phosphorylation of cytosolic proteins. There are specific cytosolic proteins. Those cytosolic proteins get, just let me shift this screen for you, is responsible for the activation of those phosphorylated proteins. So protein kinase, will be responsible for the phosphorylation of the cytosolic proteins. Let me write it for you. Next step is there are cytosolic proteins. Now, to these proteins, in the presence of protein kinase, which is belonging to transferase class, what will it do? Like there is ATP will get converted into ADP plus inorganic phosphate. Now this phosphate group is being transferred to the cytosolic proteins. Now the proteins will get phosphorylated. This is the phosphorylation of proteins. As soon as the proteins get phosphorylated, now next step will head the last step. This is referred to as biochemical response. This is what your NCRT mentions. Correct? Now the final last step is phosphorylated proteins bring physiological response. you must be aware of that FSH has a full form, follicle stimulating hormone. The hormone which is responsible for the ovarian growth, for the growth of the follicles, primary changes into secondary, into tertiary, into Graafian follicles. That we will study in class 12th in human reproduction and oogenesis. That will be more clearer over there. But FSH has a role specifically in the females is this. Whereas in the case of the males, it is responsible to stimulate the spermatogenesis. So definitely your NCERT here mentions ovarian growth. And ovarian growth here means that it is responsible for the growth of ovarian follicles. So let's have a very quick recap what we have studied. Hormones are basically responsible to bring about the action at the target site by binding to specific receptors. Correct? The receptors could be extracellular, that is membrane bound, or could be intracellular. Now, depending upon the nature of the hormone, the receptors will get activated. If they are lipid insoluble, then membrane bound receptors are there, and if they are lipid soluble, then they have the intracellular receptors there, majorly the nuclear receptor. And then we have studied the mode of action of lipid insoluble hormone. Kindly go through this. Thank you for that.